Hello and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. This week we will be discussing a data breach in an app that is, unfortunately, one that I use for two-factor authentication, Authy. Initially I used Authy because I could have it on my mobile devices and my PCs, so I could more easily grab my multifactor authentication codes when accessing accounts via my desktop or my laptop. This was pretty nice, as most two-factor authentication apps only offer a mobile version and don't have support for more traditional PCs. However, they discontinued their desktop version, and since then I've been looking for an alternative. This has become even more of a good idea because of an unsecured API endpoint that was recently abused by threat actors to verify the phone number of millions of users, making them vulnerable to different types of attacks like SMS phishing or SIM swapping, but we'll get to those in a bit. So, what happened? On June 27, 2024, a threat actor called Shiny Hunters posted a spreadsheet with 33 million rows, each containing an account ID, phone number, and a device count on users of Authy. Twilio, the parent company that bought Authy out, has confirmed that these are legitimate phone numbers, but they weren't breached in a traditional way. No one phished an employee and collected this data directly from their systems. Rather, an unauthenticated API endpoint was abused. Threat actors basically just compiled a massive list of phone numbers into the endpoint that would return account information if the phone numbers were associated with an Authy account. So, what is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's basically just a way for two or more programs to communicate. It's software that allows software to communicate with other software. This is mostly to exchange data, but if an API is left unsecured, it can allow threat actors to abuse it to scrape user data in the same way. The issue with this particular endpoint is that it did not require any authentication. No password was needed to sign in to an account to use it. Anyone could access it and, theoretically, enter phone numbers in to confirm it. Twilio has since resolved this so the endpoint can no longer be accessed without proper authentication. The good news is threat actors didn't compromise any accounts or gain access to Twilio's internal systems, but Twilio still urged users to install the latest security updates on iOS and Android. This is just to be safe and more out of user comfort rather than actual practicality. But what are the implications of all this? Can attackers get into your Authy account and steal your authentication codes? And does this mean they'd be able to log in as you when you have two-factor authentication enabled? Well, probably not, but maybe we'll get to that. There were no account passwords involved in the breach, just phone numbers and some account data, but this still poses a risk. First of all, to SMS phishing attacks, also known as smishing. You may get a phishing text that tries to send you a link, and may actually compromise your Authy account, which would then allow threat actors to log in as you. After a data breach, it's not all that uncommon for threat actors and other scammers to take advantage of that breach, emailing, or in this case, texting, victims about solutions that are actually scams. I haven't seen or have heard any reports of these texts for Authy specifically, but it could happen. So if you use Authy and your phone number was in the breach, I would be extra wary of unusual text messages. Another major risk that is also closely connected to Authy and multi-factor authentication in general is SIM swapping. A SIM swapping attack is when a threat actor contacts your phone carrier and tricks them into transferring your number to a phone that they have physical possession of, usually claiming that they are you and they bought a new phone. The reason Authy users may be more at risk than others is because if you use Authy, threat actors are going to assume that you care about using multi-factor authentication in general. The important thing here is not all websites that use multi-factor authentication support authenticator apps like Authy, and you have to stick with SMS-based multi-factor authentication. This is where a one-time passcode is texted to you rather than generated by an app. A lot of my accounts are like this. If they don't support authenticator apps, I just get a code texted to me. This can include accounts that hold very sensitive information too, like some bank accounts, investment accounts, accounts for different types of insurance, online shopping accounts, just regular websites, the list goes on. A lot of these accounts may also allow you to reset your password with just your phone number, and will text you a code to ensure it's really you, or text you a password reset link. Of course, if you've been SIM swapped, it will be the attacker receiving these codes and reset links. Thankfully, I don't see this for a ton of websites, and most will send those reset links to your email directly, and the threat actor would not have access to those, but some do allow a text message as an alternative to an email address. So, long story short, the breach of phone numbers from a service like Authy can snowball into compromises from all different types of websites. And since those websites weren't the ones that were breached, you may be unaware, and they will also be unaware. Threat actors can also use the past data breaches that contain phone numbers to match people to accounts that they can attempt to compromise. For example, my phone number was leaked in a Twitter data breach in 2023. A threat actor could see that my phone number is associated with a Twitter account and try to hack my Twitter to run some kind of scam. If you use Twitter, or X as it's now called, you may notice that bots are still as prevalent as ever. And there is actually a pretty sizable market for compromised accounts that somewhat have a following because those tweets are automatically going to reach some people. But what exactly can you do about all of this? If you realize you can't send or receive texts or calls to your phone, or your phone notifies you that it is not detecting a valid SIM card, first you should try all the classic troubleshooting, like restarting your device, toggling airplane mode on and off, just to be sure. I dropped my phone once and it knocked the SIM slightly loose, which caused this error, and I panicked for a bit thinking I had been SIM swapped, but I just kinda had to push it back into place. After you've exhausted your options for troubleshooting and you still can't receive text or calls and you're still getting the invalid SIM message, contact your phone carrier and explain the situation, and eventually things will get figured out. And importantly, for any accounts that have the option to use multifactor authentication apps instead of using a text message-based system, enable using the app. These codes can't be accessed through a SIM swapping attack. It's actually a lot harder to get them. Thank you to the Hacker News, Forbes, TechCrunch, Bleeping Computer, and Security Week for information on this data breach and its implications. And of course, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime. My name is Chloe Tonis, and until next time, stay secure.